of the United States is, at the face of it, really quite silly. To think that the U.S. was brought down by the pill, which is our gentleman's theory of history. Please, I would just like to say to the gentleman that this is a very complex process in which economic and political forces were the central factor. I would also like to say that with respect to the demographic winter issue of the population becoming what we might call an aging population, I think you must look at the most recent statistics with respect to the United States, in which the population growth rate and the fertility rate have been increasing in the last few years. If you also look at Denmark and a number of other European countries, the trend has been increasing the population growth and the fertility rate. So there is this whole issue of the demographic winter is something that, if you might, I might say, is a highly charged propaganda mechanism by certain sectors, and I do not think that it has any basis. In fact, let me just say, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, if you look at all the analysis of the recent 2008, 9, 10, 11 crisis of the economy, no self-respecting economist would say that what has caused this has been demographic winter. What has caused it has been the lack of control of speculative capital, wrong economic decisions, the failure to have a stimulus program that would really push employment. So basically, Mr. Speaker, even the analysis of Japan, where people say that it has a real aging population, no self-respecting economist would say that the aging population is the cause of this process. In fact, Japan continues to be a highly productive society, even with a population in which there's a growing proportion of aging people, because precisely productivity has been something that has been achieved through economic means. So I would just like to put to rest the fact, or your implication, that it is the demographic winter that is bringing down the economies of this society, because there's absolutely, Mr. Speaker, trust me, there is absolutely no basis in fact for this. Unfortunately, the causes are more mundane. It has to do with lack of control over speculative capital. It has to do with failure to generate employment. It has to do with bad economic policies, but not the demographic winter. So let us please disabuse ourselves that the demographic winter is a cause of economic decline in the advanced societies at this point.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to disagree with the proposition that no self-respecting economist would propose demographic winter as a cause of decline, because I think I heard it from an economist. I think there are economists who are renowned, who are respected, and who use that line that the demographic winter is a cause or even a consequence, a cause or a consequence of the contraceptive mentality, that an indication of the weakening of a nation's strength. Because it stands to reason, how can an economy, I mean commonsensically, using the logic of an ignoramus like this representation, how can an economy be said to be robust when no one is working anymore? When the vast majority of the population are already weakened by age, disease, or ultimately we will all die. What would happen to our economy when we are all dead? and there are no children or grandchildren to replace us, the Filipino people, the Filipino nation would become extinct, Mr. Speaker. And that is the logic of the democratic winter, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, I think that this, I have followed analysis regarding the issues related to the economic crisis in the West, in developing countries and others, and I really have to say that even in the current crisis in Europe at this point in time, and the current crisis in the United States, nobody, absolutely nobody, mentions demographic winter as a cause of this. You see, Mr. Speaker, the situation is that labor has become so productive in so many of these countries, and also among our countries surrounding us at this point, so that even if there's a greater proportion of people above 60 in the population, in fact, because labor has become so productive, you can do the same output with fewer people, and that has been, in fact, the common, the common experience, that in fact labor becomes more productive as there is more investment, there is more capital, so that in fact fewer people can do the same or even the greater amount of work. That's the way that economies in fact work. So that this is why no economist would say that the economic crisis in Japan, in the US, or in Europe at this point has been caused by demographic winter. Now, I don't know which economist you are talking about, Mr. Speaker, but I would like to know who this is, because probably they're trying to pass themselves off as economists, whereas in fact they're theologians.
They might disown me if I name them, Mr. Speaker. But levity aside, this representation is not an economist, and I would admit ignorance of the quote-unquote science of economics, if it can be called a science at all. But
if I could just add, Mr. Speaker, because we are talking about economists, the UP economics professors, the UP School of Economics, in a common statement said that the demographic winter is far-fetched because population momentum results in a large population base continuing to reproduce even at a decelerated rate. I think we can, I would just like to say, Mr. Speaker, that what we face in the short and medium term is not demographic winter in the Philippines. We really face, the problem of, in contrast to demographic winter, a population growth rate that is in fact quite uncontrolled at this point in time. And that, so let's put the whole idea of demographic winter, if indeed it happens, that's about 100 years away. What we really need to deal more now is really how, do we promote reproductive health? How do we promote an appropriate balance between the environment and the population? How, in fact, we practice responsible parenthood and responsible reproductive health. This is really the key issues that we need to talk about at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said earlier, I am not an economist, and I don't understand much of the economics that our distinguished sponsor discussed. No? But my concern is, who will support an aging population when there are no young people to take their place in the workforce? Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the realities, and let me just, could I just cite some figures to you regarding what we really face? And what we really face is not a demographic winter. Let me just put it this way, okay? According to the latest United Nations estimates, the total fertility rate in the Philippines, which is the expected number of children that a woman of reproductive health will produce, is at the moment and will continue to be much above the replacement level of 2. It stands at 3.1 today and is projected to be 2.8 in 2010-2015, 2.64 in 2015 to 2020, and 2.48 in 2020 to 2025. Replacement rate is 2. So these figures are above the average total fertility rate for the world in all of these periods. So the problem really that we face at this point is not demographic winter, but really a very high fertility rate. As a result of an intractable total fertility rate, the country's population is expected to rise from 93 million in 2010 to 155 million by 2050, that is by 66%. The United Nations projection for 2100 is 178 million Filipinos. In 2009, the Philippines was the 12th largest country population-wise. In 2050, it is expected to rise to 11th place, and by 2100, it is expected to have the 9th largest population in the world. Now, this is the UN scenario. Let me give you the scenario of the UP Population Institute, which is the foremost demographic center in the country. According to the Institute, had the country attained replacement level fertility of 2 in 2010, which it did not, the population would still have continued to grow and reach 150 million in 2060, after which it